Howdy, howdy. Welcome back to my tiny corner of the internet. So in today's video, I want to address a tweet that I came across. And it was kind of an interesting one, is because it got some amount of traction on Twitter. And there was it was basically along the lines that engineers are no longer going to be needed here soon, is because AI is going to do all the engineering for them. And so what matters is that you're a generalist, you're an ideas guy, you're a word seller, you're an HR person, right? You know, this is the era of soft skills, is because the AI takes in words, and it outputs words, so therefore this is the end of the engineer. You don't need to learn fluid dynamics, you don't need to learn any advanced mathematics, you don't need to learn calculus, you don't need to learn circuit analysis, is because now the AI is going to think for you, but it's not going to think too much, is because then it might have its own independent will. Neither here nor there. So I've noticed a common trend going on today, a common trend where the new culture is kind of this weird hybrid where we still respect hard skills, but we only respect a certain type of hard skills, okay? And it's kind of funny, because I came across another video by Urgently Firing doing the exact same kind of argument, where there's this bizarre culture that's growing within society, and I've noticed it for a little while, and I've commented it as well, is that there's this weird duopoly and I don't want to say cooperation between word cells and soft skills people, humanities people, and then blue collar workers that's trying to gang up and dogpile the evil elitist engineer. And it's kind of an interesting one, is because the fact is I've seen this kind of half-assed anti-elitism. I've talked about it in my previous videos. I've called out Alex Karp trying to do this half-assed anti-elitism, where somebody with a philosophy degree, is lecturing, Ivy League graduates that they're not worth as much as the blue-collar worker. And, it's this bizarre alliance where we have in today's society, in today's culture, where, we respect blue-collar work, we respect HVAC, we respect plumbing, we respect electrician work, but we don't respect engineers in a bizarre ways, because AI is going to replace those things. And it's bizarre to me, is because the thing is we all recognize that blue-collar workers produce good value for civilization. They're essential. Okay, you need electricity, you need HVAC, especially in the Deep South. You would want to live in the Deep South prior to the invention of AC. I don't know who would want to do that, is because that sounds like an awful time. So the thing is there are a lot of things that blue-collar labor is needed to maintain civilization out of necessity, is because there's a lot of things that people take for granted, but you'll be wishing you had it after the fact if it went out, like AC, your plumbing, electricity. These things are creature comforts for civilization that make the quality of civilization a good thing. These people produce real, tangible values. They build things, okay? But when it comes to white-collar workers, particularly engineers, word cells will then all of a sudden change tune and say that these people don't build anything. Now, I'm an engineer. I don't hide that fact. I'm an electrical engineer. I love building things. That's the reason why I got into electrical engineering, is because I was a massive fan of Nikola Tesla when I was a child. And I built my first Tesla coil when I was 14. Yes, those little rods that shoot lightning into the air. Yes, I built one when I was 14 because I like the idea of engineering. I like the idea of building things. And like this post said, I take pride in building things. It feels like I am studying the secrets of the universe to manifest into reality my own will into being. It's that simple. And it's kind of an interesting one, is because this ideas guy, if you want to call him that, this word cell, he's talking about how AI is going to basically do all the thinking for them. And I found that kind of interesting, is because the fact is, what is with this resentment towards engineering, right? That's why I titled the video, So You Hate Engineers. And we're going to address the psychology of this, is because I've started to kind of crack at it on why people hate engineers. Why, at the same time, people literally celebrate blue-collar work as essential builders of civilization, but for some reason, engineers who actually build things, and who are tinkerers, who do a lot of the similar things as, like, hands-on blue-collar work, why it all of a sudden gets suspended, why this kind of hollow anti-elitism that you see from, people like Alex Karp, is that when it comes to ideas guys, I think I've cracked the code on why ideas guys hate engineers. And it took me a little while to figure out, is because if you ever worked in the field, you ever worked under an technical product manager, or some typical like rich person who doesn't know what he's talking about, who's just all about ideas, he doesn't really care how it gets done, is that a lot of the time when it comes to these ideas people, is they see themselves when they're fighting with an engineer, they're struggling, they're headbutting with the engineer, they think their idea is the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's going to change the world. It's revolutionary. It's like with the Google CEO talking about how they're going to put data centers in space, that this is going to be a new revolutionary thing that's going to change the world. And then what do they do? Do they actually think out the logical consequences of their design? No, they throw it on the lap of an engineer. They expect the engineer to concretize their vision. And I've always found this kind of wild, is because the fact is that as an engineer, as somebody who studies STEM, who studied STEM, who has a background in STEM, is that I've always seen, studying advanced subjects such as fluid dynamics, circuit analysis, calculus, whatever, signal processing, it doesn't really matter. All these things that go into, or even like electrodynamics and learning about Maxwell's equations, is that all these things are telling you the dynamics of how the real world operates, so then you can make your design with awareness of how the world operates. And that's kind of the thing I realized, is that ideas guys always love to complain about the engineer. In their mind, with the ideas guys, the reason why they hate the engineer is because, in their mind, they believe it's the engineer that's in the way of them manifesting their idea. They see the engineer as the thing that is holding them back on their supposedly grand idea. It's like with the Google CEO. He thinks it's probably, this is an engineer's job. He's just going to throw his idea on the lap of an engineer and say, make this a reality. They want somebody to think for them, but not too much. That's why they're offshoring stuff to India. They offshore things to India is because the fact is it's about control to a large degree. Because they think their ideas are a godsend. They think they're the greatest thing under the sun, maybe even sent from God themselves. And so the fact is, it's not that the engineer, and whatever complaints that he's saying that his idea needs, reformation or needs to be cleaned up or refined, that's not going on in their mind. They see the engineer as this pain in the ass autistic obstacle that's stopping them from manifesting their grand idea into reality. And that is the nature of ideas, guys. They don't ever think of whether or not the idea is actually good. They just think that the engineer is elitist and is standing in the way of their grand idea from being manifested into reality. But will the ideas guy ever study fluid dynamics? Will the ideas guy ever study circuit analysis? Will he ever study electrodynamics? Will he ever pick up a calculus book? No, he won't. It's because at the end of the day, he wants somebody to think on his behalf, but not too much. And he thinks that the evil elitist engineer is hiding his hiding the truth from him and basically gatekeeping him from manifesting his idea. And the funny part is, while he's shadowboxing the engineer, he's not actually shadowboxing the engineer. He's shadowboxing reality. And when you actually understand the reason why these ideas guys hate engineers, it's not because they hate the engineer, it's because they hate reality. It's because if they actually cared about reality and they wanted to actually contend with reality, they would be studying electrodynamics. They would be studying circuit analysis. They would be studying Maxwell's equations to understand how the universe works, to know how they can manifest their ideas, but then they never do. And so when a word cell or some dipshit like this comes on Twitter talking about AI replacing engineers, the reason I don't take it too seriously is because the AI is just going to hallucinate. Is because these things are designed to be agreeable to the user, okay? And so you really have to check the output of the AI. Judgment is the most important part of the AI. So if you can't actually validate the output is because you're an atechnical dipshit that was too lazy to pick up a calculus book, how are you going to know whether or not the designs that AI is proposing to you is actually genuine, legit, or even realistic? And I know this typical word cell dipshit's going to come into my comment section. He's like, well, I'm going to make another AI agent to basically, I'm going to say, you're an electrical engineer, so now you need to validate the other AI's output. That's how stupid these fucking people are, okay? That is the mentality of the word cell, okay? But nonetheless, it's like, never does it cross in their mind whether or not that their idea is fucking stupid. It's just the fact is the evil elitist engineer is gatekeeping them from manifesting their grand idea. And it's the exact same thing with the Google CEO, is because the funny part is while he's talking about putting, these servers in deep space and throwing them out in the atmosphere, never once did he ever ask the question, A, how are you going to power it and supply power? He's probably thinking solar panels on the back of his retarded head, not the actual power input required to power these things, to scale, or how big those solar panels would have to be mathematically. Maybe I'll do a community post, to basically go through the back of the envelope map to figure out how much you would actually need to power these things. He doesn't think about that, nor does he ever probably set foot in a server room where if you've ever walked into a server room and you notice the thermal gradient and the amount of active cooling it takes to keep these fucking servers cool, they don't ever think about that because those servers run so hot, you need active cooling to keep it down. If you've ever worked in a server room, there's temperature gradients throughout the entire room. One pocket of air is like frigid cold temperature and the other one is like burning hot and you're about to start sweating. If you've ever been in a server room, you'll walk in there and you'll see, because of the airflow and the temperature gradients, like how bizarre it really is. And so, never mind the power of these servers in space. They don't think about that. Let's talk about the cooling. The fun fact about this, and I know how this dipshit CEO of Google probably thought this out. He was like, well, you know what? I'm going to put, servers in spaces because space is cold, as the pedestrian midwit says. And no offense to anybody who made that assumption in my comment section earlier, is because it's a pedestrian assumption. I don't expect somebody who is not an expert in this stuff to understand it. That's okay. But I'll go ahead and explain it right now here in this video, is because I promised to make a video on this. Is that, contrary to popular belief, space is not cold. It doesn't have a temperature. It's because it's empty space. Temperature, by and large, is a property of matter. Okay? And so the thing is different materials have different heat capacities on how much heat you can dump into it. Space doesn't have such a thing. Okay? And you might think that this is kind of, obviously you've seen in the movies that, like, if you throw somebody into space, they're just going to automatically turn into a giant fucking popsicle. Okay? That's not true. And the only reason that it might possibly happen that way is because you had moisture on your skin, and, the rapid expansion into space, causes that stuff to freeze pretty quickly. But here's what would actually happen. So if you've got a thermos, you know what this is? This is a thermos. You want to know why it's so good at actually insulating your liquids, whether it be hot or cold inside of it? Is because there's a thin, low-pressure vacuum between the outside of the cup and the inside of the cup. It's a vacuum, and it's actually one of the best insulators there possibly is because it turns out in outer space, the only way to cool something is through blackbody radiation, and that's really fucking slow. But did the Google CEO, the atechnical word cell dipshit like the guy I brought up at the beginning of the video, ever think of this or even conceive of that? No, he doesn't give a shit. It's because he's going to throw it on the lap of the engineer. And to the engineer that's working on that project, go through with the idea. Don't even argue with him. Run away with as much project money as possible, is because if you tell him that, his idea is fucking stupid, he's just going to replace with the new engineer. So just smile, give a big thumbs up, and take his money, and just try and delay the project as long as possible, and just run off with the money. I encourage you, whoever is going to be in charge of that stupid fucking program, just to walk away with all the money and just run. So, but nonetheless, the atechnical dipshit who's at war with the evil elitist engineer isn't actually at war with the evil elitist engineer. He's mad is because the engineer is a messenger on behalf of reality, telling him the truth that his idea is fucking stupid. And that's the reason why a lot of ideas guys hate engineers, is because unlike, what they can do to sociologically gaslight a group to get venture capitalists to invest in their stupid fucking idea, there's one thing. You might have a consensus in the democracy of a group, but when it comes to reality, it's an absolute monarchy. And you know what else is the case? The laws of nature are absolute too. You can't argue with it. There's no gaslighting reality. You can gaslight yourself. You can gaslight the group. You can gaslight your investors, but you can't gaslight realities, because either it works or it doesn't work. That's just how it works. And so when I read this post, it kind of opened my eyes on the mentality of the people who are sparring with this imaginary figure of an evil elitist engineer. Because it's kind of funny that the fact is they would get mad at, an engineer being elitist. And I'm not going to lie about that fact. I am, number one, an elitist. I don't hide that fact because I don't think everybody's opinions are equal. And I also don't believe truth is a democracy. So there is a hierarchy of ideas. Some ideas are better than others. And so that's the reason why I'm an elitist, okay? But that's neither here nor there. Let's address the culture of engineering, because apparently, especially within the STEM and the harder sciences, is that people tend to have a gripe against the evil elitist, STEM people, okay, and the hard sciences. I'm sorry, but the thing is that, when it comes to these things, is that if you're going to study the more difficult aspects in education, differential equations, calculus 1, 2, 3, multivariate calculus, quantum mechanics, fluid dynamics, signal processing, all these things that, stack pretty linearly, that require a ton of time, where you spend a lot of effort, and sleepless nights in the library to study. I would say that is something that earns somebody a bit of elitism, is because the fact is they worked hard for those things. These are not trivial subjects. And it's kind of funny that a lot of people would say that AI is just frivolously replacing these people, these evil elitist, intellectuals. It's kind of an interesting one, is because it's always the venture capitalist class. It's always talking about replacing the evil elitist Ivy League students like Alex Karp. But the thing is that, is it really actually doing that? Because the fact is I've said multiple times on this channel and even in my previous videos, as much as I like AI, and I get shit for it all the time in my comment section, is because there's a lot of people who hate AI. I'm actually in the minority. I like AI. I think AI is a really neat technology. I think it's going to bring a lot of good in the world. And yes, I'm probably going to get a couple of comments in my comment section, getting mad at me for saying that, but that's just my opinion. The vast majority of people don't actually like AI. Okay? But even me, as somebody who is pro AI, is almost sick and tired of the bullshit that surrounds AI, where people are claiming it's going to do things that it just can't do. And I've explained multiple times and countless times in other videos why I consider AI not to be a skill replacement, but a skill multiplier. But then again, the dipshits are still trying to use it as a skill replacement. Is that, as a multiplier, it helps people who already know what they're doing. Is that, the atechnical dipshit is going to go to the AI and basically have it think for them. How are they going to tell whether or not the AI is telling the truth or bullshitting and hallucinating them? They can't tell. You're going to tell me this word cell it's talking about replacing the evil elitist engineer is going to tell the difference, if it's outputting Fourier math, on the, and from the output than it is the other way around. You're going to really tell me that? That somebody who prides himself on not studying calculus, not doing difficult things, and is inventing the AI ideology to basically get around that, is going to understand the technical output of an AI. Yeah, right. Okay? So, this is the thing. You can complain about the elitism of engineering all day. Okay? And I know Nick over here hates engineers is because the fact is he's probably had a negative experience where he's been told that his idea is fucking stupid and that there's better ways to do it, and he just got his feelings hurt. Is because the fact is that somebody who had more knowledge about how nature works is telling him that his ideas is stupid. And it's kind of the funny part. I said earlier in this video, I might have said earlier, is that, as an engineer, I take pride in being an engineer. I like building things. I always have. But I have found this culture where, blue-collar workers build things, which they do. And then word cells are coming along and saying engineers don't actually build things, and they try to LARP as blue-collar workers when they're not actually blue-collar workers, to say that really only, blue-collar workers and plumbers and electricians are going to exist along with humanities and word cell types. Yes, that is literally the entire thesis of this video by Urgently Firing, which I'm still scratching my head at, is that, it's interesting that, word cells are trying to form this hollow alliance between themselves and blue-collar workers, which share very little, is because the fact is, again, word cells don't actually build anything, so why would blue-collar workers like your humanities ass? But neither here nor there. It's kind of funny that people talk about how replaceable engineers are, because I've noticed this culture with these people, because AI is supposed to be this thing that's going to replace engineers alone, nobody else. Artists, not even artists, which I don't even think artists should be replaced, nor is it going to replace them. I don't think AI is going to replace artists either. But the thing is that there's this weird cultural phenomenon that art, like AI, is not going to touch the humanities and the sociologists and the word cells and the ideas people. And it's not going to touch the blue-collar workers, but it's going to single out the engineers and the white-collar workers. I don't understand this logical leap. And so, I've already explained before that this is a skill multiplier more than it is a skill replacement, but that's neither here nor there. But what if I told you there is instead a secret way to replace engineers? If you don't like evil elitist engineers, I'm going to give you the once in a lifetime chance to replace evil elitist engineers right now. Are you ready? You ready to replace the evil elitist engineers? Go ahead and open up your notebook, grab your pen, and take notes, because this is how you replace the evil elitist engineers. So here's what I'm going to do for you, okay? Here's how you can replace an evil elitist engineer like me. I'm going to give you my calculus textbook. You're going to enroll into the nearest college where there's a 4-year bachelor's program for whatever engineering degree you want, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, whatever you prefer. And then you're going to go spend many sleepless nights in the library studying things such as fluid dynamics, electrodynamics, circuit analysis, signal processing, or whatever else that your degree requires you. Very difficult things. They're going to spend many hours in the library with sleepless nights studying for your final exam. And you're going to spend many hours in the library studying for your exams, and you're not going to have a personal life. You have no personal life. You're not allowed to have a personal life. You're going to work very hard in college, studying these very difficult concepts. And then, and it might take you an additional year to actually finish your degree, because that's actually pretty common with engineering, is because a lot of the times, a lot of people, have to kind of lengthen it out, is because engineering's not exactly an easy major. And then when you graduate, after all that, doing all that hard work, you're going to take my job for me for half the pay. There you go. You replaced me. There you go. You did it. You replaced me entirely. You don't need, I don't have to do my job anymore. You could do my job for me for a fraction of the pay, and you can do all the work that I did, just like me. And you can replace me. There you go. You replaced me. What, you don't want to do that? You don't want to study all that stuff and then work your ass off and then get paid a fraction of the cost? What? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's why engineers are not getting replaced anytime soon. That being said, I consider it to be a tragedy that engineering is not the respected or well-paid field it once was. And it's kind of a tragedy is because I always considered science to be magic, where if one understands the secrets of the universe and understands how to manipulate it, one can manifest one's will into existence and build some really cool things. Which is in part why I wanted to make this video, is because I wanted to show a couple of things to you guys, to my audience, the things that I built. This is a high-power 150 watt optical output laser, and you might have noticed in the previous video when I made that video talking about the limitations and capabilities of AI that I had the AI generate a couple of equations to do calculations for thermodynamics for me, to calculate, what is the minimum mass flow rate I need to handle a particular load at a particular thermal output, and what is the temperature tolerance I'm willing to accept on the output line of the fluid going into the system. And so I had the AI generate that stuff, is because I already knew how to do the math myself. I just didn't want to do it. So I had the AI to do it, and I wanted to demonstrate that in the last video. And so you might have asked what that was going towards. Well, it was going to this, is because this is 150 watts optical output, high power laser that's capable of setting things on fire at a distance. And it dumps about 250 watts of thermal heat, which is a big problem, is because the fact is if you don't dispose of that heat properly, it could potentially destroy the system. And so you need a way to siphon off that heat and throw it in the atmosphere or someplace else so you can keep your system running continuously for a long time. You might even be asking how it's able to set fire to things at a distance, and it's because I used a optical lens combination that I bought off of Amazon as well that uses a beam expander and then a collimator to basically create a lens array that is similar to a telescope, where I can have an arbitrary focal length system and focus on at any point in some arbitrary point in the future. And of course, this goes down to lens quality and beam divergence and beam quality. But the thing is that it is designed to basically allow the system to arbitrarily focus the beam at any target in a distance. Because originally I wanted to couple this with a LiDAR system, where it would measure the distance, send it to a microcontroller, and then it would back calculate using this equation to calculate how to move the lens array to focus the beam at an arbitrary distance, because I wanted to be able to set things on fire at an arbitrary distance, and it seemed I was able to achieve that to some degree. Now, obviously, I wasn't able to achieve it to a large degree because the fact is, of course, I work as a full-time, engineer, and I've got a lot of work to do, and, I don't really have a lot of time, and that kind of sucks, is because the fact is time and money seems to be the biggest constraint when it comes to fulfilling one's dreams and goals. And so that's why I'm actually bringing this to you. Because engineering is no longer respected in the republic of word cells and gaslighters, and so one must do what one can, is that if it pays better to be a word cell than it does to be an engineer, then might as well act like a Roman when in Rome. And so I'm going to go ahead and monetize this channel, is because I know for a fact that you guys will enjoy this technology that I'm sharing with you. I know you guys enjoy it, maybe even ask, how you can participate in engineering yourself, but mainly because the fact is why not take advantage of the situation you're in? If it doesn't pay to be an engineer, but it pays to be a word cell and a content creator, why not just do that? I've never considered being a content creator to be a full-time job. I don't consider it to be a real job. And I know it sounds elitist, and I know a lot of the other people who I watch who are content creators that are trying to make this their professional gig. And you can watch my original debate with Food Chops when I told her that I don't consider being a content creator to be a real job. This is not a shot to other content creators who want to make being a content creator their full-time gig. They're fully entitled within their right to do stuff. I'm very much of the opinion that you should do what you want to do in life, is because if you have a goal that you want to do, you have a passion, you should pursue it. And if that's your passion, there is nothing wrong with that. But like I said at the beginning of this video, my passion has always been engineering. It has always been building things. It has been studying the secrets of the universe and nature itself to use it to my advantage to build things. That's always been my passion. But the unfortunate part is that job is being hollowed out and offshored in favor of people who are basically just word cells and gaslighters, and blue-collar jobs aren't even paid that well either. But the thing is that what was once a prestigious profession is being hollowed out because the rent-seeking parasite class that governs our country, want to make everybody poor so they can diddle children in their mansions while everybody else lives paycheck to paycheck. So what is my advice to young engineers who are being displaced by the cost of living crisis and whose jobs are being offshored to India at this current moment? What is my advice to you? What do I suggest you do? Okay? So I want you to do me a favor and remember the time of the way things were before you had your engineering degree. The way things were then. You didn't get paid a whole lot. You may have worked minimum wage. And so the fact is did that stop you? Not having recognition for your skills or the ability to build things, did that stop you from pursuing your passions? No, it didn't. And so just because, engineering as a profession isn't as respected as it used to be, doesn't necessarily mean that you should give up your passion of building things, no more than artists getting displaced, by AI should give up their passion of drawing things. okay? You know, it's your passion at the end of the day. You enjoy it. It's fun. You know, I've already given the aforementioned reasons why I enjoy engineering, and I'll probably never give it up, even if it doesn't pay as much as it used to be. Even if I had to get a part-time job as a security guard or whatever, right? You know, I would still be a tinker. I still like to build things. I would still be programming things. You know, so the thing is, it's like, why would any of that stop just because, you know, some word cell decided to play power politics and outsource engineering jobs because they wanted to have, you know, a half-assed sense of anti-elitism against people who are skilled? You know, all they did was hollow out the United States, first the blue-collar industry 30 years ago, and now, you know, engineering and tech, right? So the thing is, the consequences of these people's actions is going to come home to roost. Eventually, there is going to be a revolution in the United States, and these people's heads will roll, okay? But at the end of the day, I want to give you individual advices because the fact is, I'm not here to talk about forming a political movement and get revenge against the ruling class. That's not what this video is about. This video is finding peace within yourself, even though the fact that you've been disrespected and humiliated, and you feel that you've been, you know, had the rug pulled under your feet and then told to go be a tradesman while being told you were more privileged than you actually are, is that recognize that your situation is no different than prior to graduating college and getting your degree. Because at the end of the day, a job is a job, and you do what you got to do to, you know, enjoy the things that you enjoy in life. Your job doesn't have to be your identity. I think the biggest thing with a lot of engineers is they think being an engineer as a professional is an identity to them. For a long time, it carried prestige and pride and money with it, but it just no longer has that. And so as soon as you get rid of that mindset and you adopt the minimum wage mindset, what I mean by that is not having commitment to a particular job and just going in and clocking out and taking the money and using that money to fund the things that you'd rather be doing, the more pragmatic you begin to understand that even though things suck now, is that there's still opportunities for you to enjoy your life and partake in the passions that you like to do, just not in the professional context. Is because the fact is this society values people who are professional gaslighters and word cells over people who have actually real hard skill. There is a silver lining to everything. I would argue in a sort of way that now it is better than any point in human history to be an engineer, is because the fact is you have all these AI bots that are capable of giving you access to information across the world, any disciplinary subject, to learn something for the first time without having to have a formal education, if you really want to figure out how something works. And that's one of the greatest things, is because I remember when the search engine first came out, and it was this kind of magical thing where you could ask questions and you could find solutions to things that you thought about. You know, it would be more obscure. You had to go through a library to get access to this information. And so the thing is now it is easier than ever. It really isn't an excuse for you not to learn something if you really want to learn it, if you're really passionate about it, okay? And on top of that, there's an entire world of technology and electronics. You have high energy density, high power batteries that are being used to power drones going 800 kilometers per hour. You have microelectronics, microcontrollers that are capable of controlling so many things that even 30 years ago would have been inconceivable, where you can create little robotic drones to drive around on the ground that you can control with your Android device through a, you know, some kind of application programming layer, okay? And so the thing is there's so much. There's 3D printers, because when I was a child and I was creating circuit boards or whatever I was making, I always got upset the fact that you had to carve holes into, like, you know, an Altoids box or something to put circuits in it to hold something. Holsters was a big thing. You had to worry about insulating the walls of that can, is because, you know, it might short circuit. And so the thing is that now you have 3D printers that can print out an arbitrary chassis for whatever design you're working on, and you can print it at your home. You know, technology is actually really nice right now, given all things considered, how things are, how bad things are geopolitically, how things are bad politically in general, which I've talked about on this channel. It's actually, you know, contrary to popular belief, even though the profession of engineering is, you know, in the toilet right now, it's never been better or even easier to be an engineer if you really put your effort towards it. If you were a tinkerer as a kid who was taking apart speakers and microwaves to build things with them, or maybe extract high voltage capacitors or high voltage transformers, right? Or maybe transistors from speakers, is that if you remember those times, you didn't have money at those times. You were a broke kid. You didn't have an income. So the thing is, even though you want to try out the fancier things that you probably saw on the internet, right? You know, it didn't really matter, is because you found a way and you got creative to tinker around with things and build things regardless of the situation that you were in. Is because at the end of the day, you like to build things, okay? And if that's what your goal is, if that's what you are as an engineer, then, you know, yes, things suck, but no, it's not the end of the world. And that's okay. Let them have their way, is because at the end of the day, they're going to have to deal with the consequences of their actions, hollowing out a world-class empire because they wanted to have a half-assed sense of anti-elitism at a supposed section of the working class, just like they did to blue-collar workers in our industry 30 or 40 years ago with China. So all you have to do is continue grinding on, continue finding your skills, and continue pursuing your passion. That's my advice to you. With that being said, I think I've made my point in this video. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I hope to see you in the next video. Take it easy.